podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello everyone and welcome to How Are the Podcast. It's Gav and you join us on this fine Tuesday morning as we look ahead to the summer, talk a little bit about transfers and all the rest of it. And I'm joined by a couple of fine gentlemen. First off, we've got Ant Waterson. Hello, mate.
Hello, mate. You all right? It's been the first time we called fine for a long time, so I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Well,
how are you? You all right?
Yeah, I'm all right. It was sexy the other week, wasn't it? Yeah. Fine's about fine for today. And also with us, we've got a veteran of the Sunderland Echo scene, 9 years as a reporter covering Sunderland FC. We've got Phil Smith with us. Hello, mate.
Morning, how are we?
Yes, very, very good. So, Phil, it's been a while, technically, because lots has happened between like the 4 weeks or so since you were last on the pod.
Yeah.
I mean, wow, what an end to the season. I imagine you're a bit like me. You're not really sick of talking about it yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny one, isn't it? Because Wembley still feels like a complete blur to me. Like, I still, it still doesn't fully feel real. And the strange thing about it is, like, to be honest, with football, it just moves on so quickly. You don't really have that much time to sort of like dwell on it and just sort of bask in it, really, because, as I'm sure we'll go on to, within a week, it's sort of all about Jobe Bellingham and retained lists and transfers and contracts. And, I think it's weird. I still don't really feel like I've had the time to fully sort of just enjoy the glow of the Wembley win, to be honest. But yeah, without doubt, the highlight, obviously, of my career so far, covering that game. Well, actually, the full 2 weeks, I would say, not just the actual game itself. Just an incredible period. I'm looking forward to, somewhere down the line when I get a chance to just actually have some time and just sit and fire up all the highlights and just sit and, see all the stuff I missed first time round and all the stuff I'd forgotten about. But yeah, to be fair, I certainly haven't had that opportunity yet.
I got that impression when I listened to Kristjaan Speakman the other day. He was talking about, basically how he's had no time to really think about it. He's got to look forward to it. But we're a good couple of weeks behind, the likes of Leeds and Burnley in our preparation. So, you spoke to him last week, I think, didn't you? Or the press got to meet with Kristjaan last week. What was that like?
Pretty much as you say, it was kind of, you have a couple of minutes chatting about Wembley and all that kind of stuff. And, then it just moves on, doesn't it? There's so much to get sorted. And as you mentioned, I think, especially with someone, you're in this weird spot of you want to enjoy the Wembley win and everything that happened and the achievement again to the Premier League. But the step up to the Premier League is so massive. We are a little bit behind in the sense that we're not a team that has had parachute payments. So we don't necessarily have that like core of the group, if you like, who've already played at the level and what have you. And as you say, because of the playoffs, there's an additional 2 weeks behind. So the scale of work that has to be done, both on the pitch and off it, in terms of the infrastructure to get everything ready for the Premier League, is just absolutely vast. And so there hasn't really been any time whatsoever for anybody, I think, at the club beyond a few days to be like, that was good, because there's just so much to be done. Because everybody knows how, difficult next season's going to be and how much work has to be done to get something competitive. So yeah, that was very much the feeling of, that was amazing. Now the hard work starts almost.
Yeah, I know as fans, it's difficult, isn't it, to not try and get too caught up, because like it was amazing, wasn't it? But we do have to try and start to look forward a bit now, don't we? We've got so much work to do as a football club over the next sort of month or so to get ready for pre-season, that you can almost we do have to kind of park Wembley now, don't we, a little bit? And as much as we want to and keep enjoying it and keep reveling in it, it's like, well, we've got a lot of hard work to do now.
I think it's one where keep the game recorded on your Sky Go or whatever it is that you use it on, and then just watch it every now and then. Now I think it is time to focus on next season. Obviously, we've had the Jobe Bellingham news, which obviously we're getting into, and start to think about where we need to improve. The teams we're going to be coming up against, Erling Haaland coming to the stadium, like stuff like that, which is all scary but all wonderful at the same time. Sure, that's what we wanted. But like Phil's made a really good point. You all forget, the players now get to go on holiday and get to do whatever they need to do. But, the Kristjaan Speakmans, the Stuart Harveys and everyone back, they don't get to go on holiday. We've got to look to sign players. We're going to be looking to who's going to be leaving, who's going to be coming in. It's going to be a very, very interesting period. And it's also going to be kind of the end of an era, isn't it? These players that we've had the last couple of years who've took us to where we are, they are going to be players leaving. There's going to be a brand new squad next season, so we'll see what happens. It's exciting but nervous at the same time, I think.
It's a bit of a weird one as well, Phil, isn't it? Because although Anto said there, a lot of the players will have jetted off for holidays and things like that. Still, you look about, we've got lads playing international football. We've got all kinds going off all over the place. Where that's gonna think you figure into your thinking too. Like that's gonna have some sort of impact on the way we prepare certainly at the start of pre-season. That the likes of Chris Rigg and Eliza Mayenda, they couldn't even get over the hangovers before they were on a plane to go off on international duty. I mean, it's a bit of a weird summer in that sense too, isn't it?
I think like there's a more general point, isn't there, about the schedule and just that it's not right. The strain that's been put on these young footballers is completely wrong. And I know obviously they're incredibly well remunerated for that, and there's all the positives that come with it. But people keep talking about Yamal, don't they? And I think that's the most perfect example of just what an absolutely ridiculous amount of football that kid's played. And you do sometimes worry for the Sunderland players, because a lot of these lads, they're in pretty much their first professional season, and then they've played 50 games and then they're going again barely without a break and playing. So it'll definitely be a factor. I mean, I think for those players, it'll probably be a positive in terms of they'll want to hit the ground running when pre-season starts, because they'll want to prove that they want to be in the team for the Premier League season and they're good enough. And probably that'll allow them to maintain their fitness well. But I do think it's like a broader concern in football. It doesn't seem right to me that players after the season they've had are potentially going on and playing for another month. I just think, I think a lot of these players might well struggle down the line somewhere. That's not a Sunderland point, just a general point. I just don't think it's right.
Yeah, well, I was watching Northern Ireland the other night, and Dan Ballard and Trey Hume were playing against Denmark, and it was proper backs to the wall, like bodies on the line stuff, and I'm watching it through my fingers, really a bit worried. Like, Jesus, is there any need for this? Do they really need to be playing in these games?
Yeah.
And you watch the Nations League final as well, and that goes to extra time and penalties. And then there's going to be the Club World Cup. I mean, we'll get on to Jobe in a second, but that's had a massive impact on that deal, just because Dortmund are flapping to get a player in. And you just think, like, where does this all end? Like, it doesn't feel like the schedule's getting any lighter, does it? It feels like it's getting busier, if anything.
Well, I think that's the thing. I mean, Hume will be all right, by the way. I think he could just play every single day for like the next 100 years. But yeah, no, that's the thing. That's just finding more and more they're just finding more and more pockets of games. I mean, it's, I suppose the international football is slightly different. I mean, for the players, I know, for example, like Trey Hume, Dan Ballard, something they're incredibly proud of. I suppose that's a bit different to the post-season tours that you're starting to see creep into the game, which is just, absolutely ridiculous.
Man, you have just been off on one, haven't they? I think in Malaysia as well. That was just ridiculous, like pointless games.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one in terms of managing, especially with Sunderland, all these young players who, as I say, Sunderland coming off the back of their first season, having featured in 50-odd games and then going away again on international duty. So yeah, these players, if the Euros goes on for another sort of under 19s, under 21s goes on for another 2-3 weeks, these guys are potentially going to have about a fortnight before they're back in for the start of a new season. I imagine that will all be accounted for and prepared for Sunderland. They'll be thinking about how they ease these guys back in and give them the rest they need, because mentally as much as physically, innit? Like, such a long draining season, so many ups and downs, they need to switch off mentally, not just physically. But I'm quite sure that's something that Sunderland will be very much prepared for and thinking about when they're setting all the schedule up for pre-season.
Yeah. Does that concern you at all, Ant? That the fact that Chris Rigg, Eliza Mayenda, players like that who are the kids, and they're going to be part of the first team squad next season. Is it a concern that they're being stretched so much? I mean, I know we got a bit of a rest at the end of the regular season, and the club made a concerted effort to ensure that the squad was ready for the playoffs. But it's like it's all ramped up again. They're away on international duty. Tournament football's brutal. Games every couple of days. It is a bit worrying, isn't it?
It is, and I just think it's just the timing of everything. It's you go on about this burnout and stuff with players, and a lot of like kind of stuff with mental side of what players want to be doing, and then you say, no, we just want you to play here, you want you to play there, want you to play that. There's just no time for a rest. Like, see if some of these players get 2 weeks, it's no good for them, is it really? But I think
That's not really,
with
that's not a
us,
rest. That's not a rest,
it's
is it?
not, is it really? No, it's not. And you know what, though? I think we've got the right people in charge now, the likes, Register Brainham and that, who will probably give the likes of Mayanda and Rig, if they play a lot in this, because Rig's playing in the under-19 tournament, isn't he? And
Yeah.
if he comes back and he's jaded and whatever, you probably won't expect to see him against like your Gatesheads or your South Street, something maybe like have like their own little, pre-season adaptation to them too, you know what I mean? So I feel all right, having that we've got people in, in the back room and all that who know how to, treat these players. It was Lee Johnson who completely burnt out the lad we had on loan from Man City, wasn't it? He was just gone running. He was just gone running because walking through mud. I don't think that'll happen with Rig and Mayanda, but it is a concern, and it's something that we need to I think the whole of the FA need to think about that, because you look at a prime example is Phil Foden this season for Man City has been awful, and Phil Foden's a world class footballer. He's been he's actually come out and said that he's mentally and physically spent because he was at the Euros. He's obviously with Man City all this season. He's got a Club World Cup now. Straight back into it next season. Where does it end?
Well, yeah, that's it. It ends with players who are at that caliber, young players who they get the 30-year-old and they just the tail off. It happened with Wayne Rooney, didn't it? He got a 30-year-old and he was like he was a 38-year-old. So yeah, it is a concern, but we'll see how that plays out.
Gav, you mentioned though, about these post-season tours that Man United's been on. I mean, thank God they scrapped the FA Cup replays. You know what I mean? Because that tired. Thank God for that. But it's an argument for another day. But never mind.
That's it. But again, we seem to be getting more games rather than less. Somebody who we've already touched on a couple of times, and it's the meat of the pod today, because as we speak, it looks as though Jobe Bellingham is all but confirmed as a Dortmund player. The deal we saw coming a mile off. I don't think anybody can say they were shocked to say Jobe has left Sunderland or is about to leave Sunderland. I just want to grab your initial thoughts on this, Phil, because it's a deal which, we all saw coming, but how far down the line do you think this was actually planned? Like, is we saw this with Jude, didn't we, when he left Birmingham, went on to Dortmund and then to Real Madrid. It's almost as though this family have their entire pathway of the careers of these two lads just mapped out years and years in advance. They know where they're going. They know what's going to happen. And Sunderland's role in that was we almost facilitated it. The kickback we get is that we get a lot of money for him, and the reputational improvement in that we've brought a player on to the point he's got a massive move. Like, Sunderland will undoubtedly benefit from this deal. But what's your understanding of this whole situation and how far down the line it was all mapped out? Because I imagine when he came to Sunderland as a Ben, when he was 2 years ago now from Birmingham, it was part of the plan. I would have thought that he would get this chance eventually.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think you're absolutely right in what you said, and that I think with both Bellinghams, the career kind of arc, if you like, it is planned out in advance, maybe a lot more than it would be for the players. I think my sense of this is that had Sunderland not won at Wembley or lost in the playoff semi-finals, I think this would have happened very, very quickly. I think clearly it's something that a lot of preparation, a lot of background work had been done on this, and I think Sunderland were very comfortable with that, in the sense that I think had Sunderland not got promoted, I think there would have been an acceptance that, having not stood in Jobe's way, but having convinced him to stay another year last year, and with Bellingham having said, yep, I'll give it one more year, let's try and get this club up, when I think it was Crystal Palace and Brentford a little bit less, so we're at the table. I think it was understood that, it would have happened very, very quickly, I think. I think that's clear. I think that genuinely, Sunderland winning at Wembley and get promoted to the Premier League, I think it did slow it down considerably and actually gave everyone a bit of pause for thought. And Sunderland definitely tried to say, well, look, would you not consider coming and playing in the Premier League with us? Is that not something you'd want to do? And I think Bellingham, did have a big decision to make, and I think it was a difficult decision. Ultimately, once he indicates that he still is minded to go to Borussia Dortmund, it then just becomes about sort of a negotiation. I never felt, and this isn't like huge insider info, this is just me observing over the last couple of years and picking the feeling up. I don't think Sunderland were ever going to stand in his way, because of the strength of obviously the relationship between the Bellingham family and sort of the club hierarchy, which we all know about. And also the fact that I think there was a lot of respect for the fact that, Bellingham could potentially have have angled for a Premier League move last summer and didn't. So I think they were always going to, they were never going to stand in his way. But at the same time, Sunderland winning promotion changed the goalpost considerably. And so they weren't just going to sort of wave him off for a pittance, if you like. And that's why this has probably taken on longer than it has. And I think you've seen in the end result that Sunderland have ended up with a pretty beefy fee. Whether whichever side is briefing what the numbers are, I think we can all agree it's a beefy fee. So, so I don't think it was one that, I think promotion did genuinely slow the whole process and make everyone sort of stop and reassess. But yeah, I think your fundamental assessment is right, is that, there's clearly been a huge amount of background and preparation done on that. And Sunderland, I would say, no shock to them, comfortable with the process. They understood that this was how things would develop when they signed Bellingham. And ultimately, the main thing is he always put it in on the pitch, didn't he? I think that's the big thing. Like, it's something that could leave you feeling a little bit cold and cynical about the whole thing. But I think the fact that Bellingham represented the club the way he did and the way he played this season just gives it a completely different sort of feel, doesn't it? So as you say, it could feel quite businesslike and quite calculated and quite cold. But I think the way that Bellingham's represented the club and the passion with which he's played, I think means that I get the feeling, I mean, you guys will speak to this better than I do, but I get the feeling most people it's sort of thanks and all the best rather than anything else.
It's been a bit of a masterclass in how to do business, if I'm honest. I think it's shown that you can get a very good deal over the line without it sort of going down to him essentially like messing the club around or the club messing him around. It's been done in a very respectful way, hasn't it? Where it's almost and I think the fans have had plenty of time to process this and get their heads around, like, Jobe will eventually leave Sunderland. It'll be done in a very specific way. And you've seen it in the reaction, a very, very little negative reaction to this move. I think it's almost been our fans have stood up and took a bit of pride in it and went, we've done well out of this. We've done brilliantly. We've got promoted. We've got a cracking player for a couple of years. We've done very well financially out of the sale. We move on. We shake hands. There's no hard feeling between Sunderland and Jobe. And I just think I honestly think we're kind of setting the standard for how you should do business with your players and with other clubs. Like, it doesn't have to get down to it where he's hiring in transfer requests and there's negativity being slung out through the press and stuff. I think it's been done in a very respectful way.
I think it shows the sign of a very well-run football club, to be totally honest with you. Not even, obviously we'll go into data with the Jobe one, but you remember the Jack Clark one, Ross Stewart one, where we've signed players for, very little money, and then sold them for, a good profit. And you just look at the benefits now. You look what happened since we've sold the two are now promoted. You just listen, at the end of the day, Jobe Bellingham was never going to be here forever. He was always the pathway that his parents or whatever he's got behind him. He's got a lot of, obviously a lot of clever people behind him who want him to go there, following his brother's footsteps. Fantastic. I'm really, we can't stand in his way there. You know what I mean? We kind of deny him, what is going to be Champions League football eventually. Hopefully, he'll move to a bigger club and following his brother's footsteps. That is what it is. But the fact is now we're going to be 30-odd million quid better off, and that's we've got to start thinking about PSR rules and this, that, and the other. That's going to put us in very good stead. You include the Tom Watson deal behind that as well. So we're already now in a very, very good position for us to bring players in, which is what we're going to have to do. And what fans are a little bit disappointed here, yes, we would have all liked to have seen Jobe in the Premier League. But what we've got to remember is this is the way that we do things now. We bring players in who, are young for a minimal fee, improve them and sell them for inflated profit and everything like that, and then we move on again. And that, for me, is the way that football has got to move now. You can't just be signing players for 80, 90 million all the time and then, getting them on 10-year contracts and stuff, because it's not gonna work. So, yeah, I wish him all the best, Gav. I think it was good. It was coming from the moment he put that thing on Instagram, and he put job done, didn't he? He probably should have put Jobe done. It would have been a bit better, but we all knew it was coming. Dortmund are a fantastic club, a giant in European football, brilliant stadium, brilliant fans. He'll love it out there. I think it's a great league for him to go in because of the way he plays. It's a bit of a slower league than the Premier League, so he'll be able to dominate. I think he'll be a success for him. I really hope he is, because I think he's a wonderful footballer with a lot of potential to be a world-class player. and we're going to be better off for it because we're going to bring in a couple of replacements who hopefully keep this club in the Premier League. So it's a great deal all around. Best of luck to Jobe, and what we've got to do now as fans. Well, thank you very much. Let's move on. To be honest,
yeah. With the Club World Cup coming up, Phil, do you think that's put more pressure on Dortmund to get this deal done? Because it seems to have started out with, you talked before about it depends who briefs who on what figures and stuff, but the original bid was believed to be around 20 million. And then you see the deal that's been reported now, I think it was Fabrizio Romano reported, a 33 million euro fixed fee, 5 million euros in add-ons, a 15% sell-on clause for Sunderland, which to me represents a fantastic deal if that's true. But do you think the timing of this has weighed in Sunderland's favour with the Club World Cup coming up?
Yeah, I think there's an element of that. It was obviously speaking to people here and trying to speak to people in Germany a little bit as well who kind of know Dortmund, how Dortmund operate. That was very much the early analysis, was that they wanted to get him in for the Club World Cup, give him an early opportunity to sort of get bedded in. And I think obviously part of this is just the general art of negotiation, right? In terms of Dortmund have got to protect their interests, so they come in with a low bid and see what the temperature is and see what they can get away with. I think they fairly quickly realised that, the shape of the deal had changed a lot because Sunderland were a Premier League club. And I think that's probably more important than anything, is what has seen this now edge towards what Bellingham's release clause was. So I think that's the main factor. But the Club World Cup has definitely added a time pressure because, obviously the mini transfer window shuts tomorrow. I mean, the whole thing is just completely bizarre. I don't really understand why the Club World Cup's happening. I keep seeing teams who are playing in it, and I'm like, why are they playing in it? They haven't won Champions League or anything like that, but that's a separate debate. But yeah, Dortmund are definitely really keen to get Bellingham in because from my understanding, and that Bellingham wouldn't have moved if this wasn't the case, but he is going into the team, not necessarily as a guaranteed starter, but he is going in as an established first-team player. It's Dortmund aren't just signing him because his surname's Bellingham, although clearly there's a huge amount of potential there. From what I understand, they've been looking for a long time for a box-to-box midfielder and haven't quite been able to get it right. They're really keen to get someone who, drives forward with a ball, turns away from markers, who is really good defending against counter-attacks. So I don't think this is just like, we made loads of money on Jude, let's sign his younger brother. I think they've actually sort of scouted him incredibly heavily, and I think there's a pretty much a defined role for him to walk straight into. So that's definitely a big factor. But I think probably from my sort of discussions I've had, Gav, I think the main thing that has pushed this price up towards the release clause is just the fact that Sunderland's position was so strengthened by the fact that they had this release clause, and B, they were a Premier League club. It's just a completely different conversation at that stage.
It's as well though. We weren't under any real pressure to sell. We were quite happy to keep him. As you say, the Premier League is a even though it's not maybe where Jobe saw himself in the coming season, it's not a bad booby prize, is it? If he had to stay at Sunderland and play in the Premier League. So it's. I couldn't say how we didn't win in this deal.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one because maybe Dortmund's initial stance and the bids that were going in were probably born from the fact that, as we discussed earlier, Sunderland were never going to block Bellingham going in terms. Do you know what I mean? And again, this is just my feeling from having been around the club for the last couple of years, but I just don't see a world when it's like, no, we're stopping you going. Because as you kind of alluded to earlier, that's what the whole project is based on. It's, the whole point, the whole reason why Jobe Bellingham signed for Sunderland when he could have gone to, I don't know this for a fact, but I would have thought any Premier League club you can name at 16 was because Sunderland were going to play him and then they would let him go when the time was right. That's the whole reason why he signed for Sunderland. It's the whole reason why pretty much Chris Rigg signs a professional deal when he has offers from, clubs offering much more money who were already in the Premier League. So I don't think they were ever going to stand in their way, but I think what Sunderland got right was saying, yeah, no problem. It's the right time for you to take this opportunity. Last year wasn't the right time, but it's still got to be the right deal for us. And I think what you're seeing is a fairly sensible middle ground. It's probably not quite where the release clause is at, but I think Sunderland were always pretty realistic about that. And obviously the fact that they've got to sell on, is obviously a really important factor, because if Jobe does kind of explode in the next couple of years, then there's potentially another chunk of money there that would push this deal further forward. So yeah, I think Dortmund maybe came at this thinking, well, they're not going to stop him, so let's try and be a little bit cheeky about it. And in the end, I think there's been a a sensible kind of middle ground reach. And I think probably that time pressure of everybody wanted this done. Let's be honest, it suits Sunderland as well. Because let's be fair, this leaves a massive gap now in midfield for next season.
Yeah.
We don't really have anyone of Bellingham's ilk. We have very, very, very good midfielders, but nobody quite like Jobe, in my opinion. I think this leaves a massive gap now in midfield, and Sunderland need it resolved early because they need to go out and add. Because you're going up into the Premier League, most foul players untested at that level, and you don't know how many of them. Some of them, I have no doubt, will acclimatise and adapt and make it. Some of them won't. Jobe's one of the few where you felt pretty confident that was definitely going to be the case, that he could step up. You've lost one of those players now. So while there's loads of positives from this financially, and as you say, in terms of like the project and stuff, this leaves a massive gap in Sunderland's midfield, and that is going to be a huge body of work for the club to get that sorted in the summer window.
Are you confident Ant will find that replacement pretty quickly? Because it is, as Phil says, big shoes to fill in that midfield, and we've got a lot of money to play with now. But when you see the calibre of some of the names we're being linked with, it's almost like how quickly can we get this done, rather than whether we will do it. In my opinion, I think there's a lot of good players out there who look at this, particularly the way we've handled the Jobe situation, and they'll think, I want to play for Sunderland because that could be me. I could go there to get developed, get me big move down the line, and be better off for it, having played like 100 odd games in the top flight. I think it's a case of who we bring in, isn't it? Not when or if.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It's a great point that Phil's made, that we do have to replace him. We've got to replace him with a very good footballer, to be fair. Because you've got to remember as well, last season when Jobe didn't play for us, I don't think we won a game, did we? I think it was like 8 games he missed or something on it, and we lost 5 and drew 3 or something. So that's how he was massive for us, wasn't he? But I think you've got to remember as well, we have got Lafayette as well. I think he'll probably play in the 10, and then we do need that number 8, don't we? And yeah, I trust in Kristjaan Speakman and everyone behind the scenes to bring in that player. It may not be 1, it might be 2. Where we alternate or something like that, because you've got to remember Chris Riggs there as well. So, but it's massively important. It's probably the first position on the list. You would see that we need to go out and get is Jobe's replacement. So I can't name you one. I don't want to name you one because there's a lot of more cleverer people behind the scenes than me. And I haven't played on Football Manager for the last 5 years, so I'm not really sure. But no, I think Phil's hit the nail on the head. It's a big deal for us. A huge deal, huge monetary deal. But it's all we've got to remember. Yes, it's good for us and everything like that. But we've also got to remember we have got to get this appointment right. Got to get this new player right.
That's it. I mean, one of the names we've heard linked, Phil, is an obvious one. Jordan Henderson is a player who seemingly makes a lot of sense on paper. Look at it, looking for a new club, still playing at a decent level. Just started during the week for England, but obviously a lot older and a lot wiser than when he was here last time. Is that something you can see happening, or is that just a very obvious link that everyone's making, rather than it being something which we will actually carry out and do?
I think it's a possible. Is probably how I would put it at this point. I think that it's definitely something that there's definitely an awareness that Henderson could be available this summer, and I think that the feeling is that you would be daft not to consider that, in terms of you're going up a level where you don't have a huge amount of top tier experience. Someone of Henderson's sort of leadership and quality would be potentially invaluable. I think it's something that I don't think you rush into, because I think you've got to make sure it's the right deal and you're not just doing it for the reasons of kind of sentiment. And probably if you look at what happened with Jermaine Defoe's return, I think that's probably a little bit of a warning sign that you've got to make sure there's a place in the team that everything's right, rather than just kind of rushing into it. Now, obviously, it's a completely different situation in that Henderson's been playing top-level European football regularly last season. He's playing for England the other day, wasn't he? So I'm not comparing the two directly. I just mean I think maybe there'll be an element of caution if and when they decide to explore that, which I suspect they will. But I mean, Henderson's a different player now, isn't he, to when he left us? And he might be part of the puzzle, part of the answer, but he's not, in my eyes, a Bellingham replacement. We're going into a season where potentially, I mean, Sunderland are already kind of a counter-attacking team in the Championship. They're probably going to have even less of the ball next year. And I think you've got to, I think Bellingham, we have some wonderfully talented players, but I think the way Bellingham could carry the ball up the pitch, relieve your pressure, sort of win fouls, link up with the wingers. I think it's a skill set that Sunderland need to replace. I'd be concerned if Henderson was like the direct replacement for that, but I think as part of the kind of puzzle that you're trying to put together in midfield, I could potentially see him being an option for that. I don't think it's just like a lazy link, if that makes sense. I think there is a little bit of something to it. My impression, I get, is it's incredibly early days on that front. But yeah, it's definitely one to watch, I think, as the summer goes on.
Well, I think with Jordan Henderson as well, as we just said, he's been playing for England and he won't have had his summer break yet, and he's probably going to want to go away and think about what he does next, because he's going to have offers. It won't just be Sunderland, but it makes perfect sense, doesn't it, to at least link him with Sunderland. Sunderland promoted after a bit of experience through the core of the midfield, and he's somebody I would like to see in a Sunderland shirt. But I think Phil makes a really good point there about how, when you think of Henderson's role, actually his role in the last 3 clubs he's played for, even when he was playing out in Saudi, Ajax and Liverpool, playing for teams who dominated the ball and get an awful lot of time on the ball. And I know he's looked after himself. He's a little bit older now, but he's someone who's a bit like James Milner, looked after himself, done all the right things off the pitch, will probably play up until he's 40, I would have thought. He can still do it. It's whether he can play in a team which doesn't have lots of the ball at his age.
Yeah.
It is a big ask.
You don't want him playing 40 games a season, do you? You want Henderson to be like, when we're at home against you, and again, no disrespect to the likes of the teams we're going to be up against, like Leeds, Burnley, Wolves, the teams who you think are going to go down. You want them then when we're at home, when we've got a chance to dominate the game. When you want Henderson in. I wouldn't want Jordan Henderson playing for us every single minute of the season if he was to sign. I think personally it's a no-brainer for me, because I would have him just for his experience. To bring along the likes of Dan Neil, to bring along the likes of whoever else we get in. You look at like Harrison Jones, who's got a chance of being a good footballer, the like of Jordan Henderson coming in with his experience. I think it'll bring a lot of younger players on. So I think for everything, it's a great deal. I would be disappointed if he went to another Premier League club instead of us. But if he was to say, I want to go to Italy, or I want to go wherever, I don't think I would be overly bothered if he chose to go there. But if he'd gone say, again, go to like Wolves or something, I'd be like, come on, man. You know what I mean? But I think it just makes sense for him to come here. I don't think he'd want massive wages, would he, now? Because he's earned his money. Let's not, beat him on the bush. Jordan Henderson's a made man. To come home to try and keep us up would be a perfect end to a good career for him, I think.
But he's not going to want to come back and be a cheerleader, is he? Do you know what I mean? He has that's my thing. He has ambitions. He at the moment looks like he's going to be in the World Cup squad next summer if he plays regularly next season. And he's just been playing for Ajax every week.
Yeah.
It's just where that's why I'm saying I have no doubt that Sunderland would be open to having Henderson back, and I have absolutely no doubt that Henderson would love to come back and be part of the Sunderland team. But that's what I mean, is you've got to be super careful that there is a role there, that everyone's comfortable with it and that you know what it is. And maybe that was the lesson of the Defoe. Maybe that was a little bit too sentiment-based, and maybe it was something that was a little bit rushed, and then 6 weeks down the line, everyone's going, actually, well, hang on. So I think that's the thing about the Henderson one, is that like Henderson's not like about to retire, right? He still has ambitions. He's got a potential place in a World Cup squad next summer. So everybody needs to make sure that he's not just coming back because it's a nice story, that there's a role in the actual team for him that everybody is comfortable with. I think that's the important part, and that's why I'm saying I can see it. But let's see what happens. And I don't see him playing the Bellingham role. I think he's still got a huge amount of offer, but I don't see him being a box-to-box aide for Sunderland in the Premier League. So I think that's where the interesting discussion potentially might be in the coming weeks and months.
And Gav, that would be my worry, that if we sign him to say, right, he's the Bellingham replacement, because he can't do that anymore. You know what I mean? He's 35-year-old. We can't expect him to do that. If he comes and Dan Neil's automatically out the side, what are you thinking then? So I think that's a good point. We've got to think everything's got to be right for us first to bring Jordan in. If Jordan wants to come, brilliant. If we want to sign him, brilliant. But everything's got to, and this is what Kristjaan Speakman and Stuart will be thinking. Is that role that he wants to play going to be beneficial to us in the long term? So it'll be an interesting one.
Yeah, I think if he does sign it, it will be to play regularly, as we've alluded to. You know, he's the big goal for him will be in being in the spotlight, so that he makes that World Cup squad. He's going to want to play one more World Cup before he hangs up his boots, and it might marry up fine. You know, play for Sunderland in the Premier League, get 30, 35 games maybe in the Premier League, play for England next summer. That's probably where his short-term ambitions lie. But for me, it comes down to pounds and pennies, if I'm honest. I know you said
I have to ask you a question, and just ask you a question. Would you play him every week in this team currently?
Yeah, I would. Do you know why? Because I think this was alluded to when I think Kristjaan Speakman said this last week when he was doing the rounds. Almost like our strategy changes now we're in the Premier League. So, you know, we're not going to play the same way as we did last season. There'll be elements of our play which is very similar, but we will have to adapt. And it'll almost be on the proviso, like, you know, we have to, we'll probably be sitting in a lot more, but we also have to have more of the ball. Because, it's the Premier League, but not everyone plays the same way. It's not like the Championship where teams come to the stadium and like and put 11 men behind the ball. That's not going to be the case. So we're gonna have spells in games where we do need to dominate. And in them situations, you know, if you've got an international Champions League, Premier League winning midfield player who has seen and done it all, played hundreds of times in the Premier League, you've got to take advantage of that rather than worrying about what everyone else is doing. So I think if Henderson came to Sunderland, he would play most weeks, and I would be glad for that. And it wouldn't necessarily mean Dan Neil would be out of the team. His role would probably change. You could see Dan Neil playing that 8 position maybe. He's done it before. He looked good there. But there's, again, we're getting into semantics here. I think ultimately...
Well, that's
it. But ultimately, if he did come to Sunderland, I think he would be expected to play nearly every week. And it's not like we're talking about a 35-year-old who's had a ton of injuries, who haven't looked after themselves. Jordan Henderson can still play at the top level. I'm convinced of it. Thomas Tuchel wouldn't be picking him for England if he couldn't. For me, that's one of the most important barometers here. Is if anyone's worried about whether he can still do it, he's playing for England, and the England manager who has won everything as a club manager thinks Jordan Henderson's capable, which to me should be a big tick in the box. And anyone who was, I don't know about you, Phil, but anyone who's turned on, because there are some people who are a bit unsure about it, and they were like, "Oh, really, Jordan Henderson, 35-year-old?" For me, I just think it's a no-brainer. If that's a deal we can make and it makes sense for the team, we've got to do it. It would be a massive win for Sunderland, that considering we're going to be right up against it next season to try and stay up.
Yeah, as I say, my only reservation is making sure everyone's on the same page if that does happen, because I think that, you know, sentiment only carries you so far. So that's, you know, as we alluded to before, that's my main concern. But if the option's there to go and add some experience of that level, then I think it would largely be a positive one. But as I say, I think that's part of the solution. I don't think it's the solution in of itself. I think that Sunderland are going to have to now, especially because the pace and the intensity of the Premier League is so much, I think they're going to have to find a lot of power in that midfield this summer, because I think Bellingham leaves. Yeah, I really do feel like it leaves a big hole from what we saw last season.
In previous summers and in previous winter windows, actually, the way they've played out's been quite similar. You know, we tend to wait till the back end of a transfer window to really strengthen the team. But I don't know if this is the impression you got from speaking to Kristjaan Speakman last week or not. But do you see this playing out differently? Because I mean, you touched on it before. We need a lot of quality, and we can't. My opinion is we can't wait till the last week of August, because by that point we'll be weeks into the season, and it's like, it's not the Championship, it's the Premier League. You've got to be ready for this.
I think the big thing that's changed now is you're placing the pecking order. I think that's the fundamental thing, and that one of the reasons why quite often you see so many deals done at Championship level late is because you're waiting for the Premier League to do their business, because you're trying to, a lot of cases, you're trying to take their players when it comes to loans. Yeah. Generally, what we've seen from Sunderland in the summer windows, it's quite often been like 2 stages, hasn't it? So there's been an initial stage where there's a flurry of deals. I remember that summer where we signed Hemir, Triantis, Jobe. That was all done really early in the summer, and then basically nothing happens until the back end. To be honest, I wouldn't be hugely surprised if it's quite similar now. I wouldn't be hugely surprised if you see someone go out and sign relatively, I'm not saying it's going to get announced today, but I wouldn't be surprised if you see someone invest quite heavily fairly early in the window in players that they've been tracking for quite a long time. And then maybe you will see a bit of business towards the end of the window where it's, look, how can we improve this squad? What opportunities are there? Because the reality is you can do the best preparation ever. Things happen at the end of transfer windows that you just don't see coming. Mad stuff happens. Players suddenly become available who at the start of the window you'd have been knocked back immediately if you asked for them. So you've got to have an element of flexibility, Gav, and I think that you have got to be alive to the fact that a really, really good loan opportunity, for example, could come up at the end of the window. That's just kind of the way it works, and it's infuriating for all of us because you think, well, why didn't you just do this months ago? But that's just how it goes. But I think, in answer to your early point, I think we will definitely see Sunderland be very, very targeted. And I think certainly in terms of the transfer fees they spend, I would expect that to be sooner rather than at the end of the window, because these will be players who they've been watching for a long time, saying we can't afford them in the Championship, but if we go up to the Premier League, these are the guys that we want to invest our money on, not just for next season, but for the next 3-4 years.
And you've seen the caliber of player we've already been linked with, and again, you've got to take it with a pinch of salt to a degree. There's the story which came out on Monday about the Ukrainian striker at Dynamo Kiev potentially being an option. You've got Doyle at Wolves, who was linked last week. Charlie Gray at Man City, who's been linked. So it's still, despite us talking about all this, we're still looking at very young players. Do you suspect that'll be the case then, that we still go along that line of maybe a higher caliber of young player than we've previously talked about, because we've now got the money to spend it? That's how I see it, Gav, 100%. I think we will see the bulk of the budget spent on 4 or 5 younger players. I think it'll be slightly different from previous years, because I think that there's an understanding that players need to be more proven to go into the Premier League, right? Like we've seen how it took Meander a while to adapt to Championship level, for example. So I think there's a reality that you need to invest in a slightly more proven player and probably some more players who have some level of experience at top tier, because you can't just throw them into the Premier League. I think that's the big difference. Like one of the things that Kristjaan Speakman said to me, not about transfers, but just speaking generally, was that you're going up one division, but you're basically going up 3 levels. And that's very, very different from when you go League One to the Championship. So I think there will be a change, because there's an acceptance that you can't just chuck in totally unproven players at Premier League level. So I think they will see slightly more experienced players, but I expect the bulk of the money to be invested on, younger players with resale value, because this isn't a 1-year project. It's a 5-10 year project to establish Sunderland at this level. So what I think you will see is 2 or 3 players, maybe on shorter term deals or loans or whatever it is, to add that little bit more experience, that little bit more nous. And that's where I guess potentially a Henderson comes into that bracket. But I don't think we'll see a fundamental shift. I think the bulk of Sunderland's money this summer will be spent on players with a lot of development still to do. Does it interest you at all that still people are talking about Jayden Danns potentially coming back? Like somebody who, say coming back, he never really came, did he? But it's somebody who obviously we've got a long-standing interest in. Again, people probably look at that and go, bloody hell, what we're doing? He was injured last year. We didn't even see him kick the ball.
Yeah.
But like, there does seem to be a longer term view taken on these sort of...
Yeah. I can only give you my gut feel on that, and there might be one that in sort of 2 months time people will chuck back at me and laugh at how little I know. But my feeling is, if we were talking about what might Sunderland's squad in the Championship look like next season, my feeling is that Sunderland would have been really, really trying to bring Danns back. And my feeling is, and again, this might prove to be completely wrong, I think Sunderland always knew, that if Danns did play last season, it would be a fairly limited role. But I think that my feeling was always that there was this thing of, well, if we build a really, really good relationship with Liverpool, if we build a really, really positive relationship with the player, if it comes to August next year and Arne Slot says, right, it's time for you to go out on loan, that potentially we'd be at the front of that queue. It's hard because I've not watched him play and you don't know how quickly players are going to develop. But for me, Sunderland need like another striker who I think is a bit more established at the top level. That's just my feeling. So if we were talking about building a Championship squad for next season, I think Danns would be very, very prominent in that discussion. I'd be surprised, to be honest, if that happened at Premier League level. But, he's obviously very, very highly regarded. I think there's just so much. That's the difficult part of trying to suss out, is what his level is as, because we've not seen him. We just don't know, do we? And, if he trains with Liverpool for 6 weeks in pre-season, does he just, kind of explode? And then all of a sudden he's a guy. So I think the relationships are very, very positive, and I think that's absolutely deliberate. That's always been sort of Liverpool and Sunderland's plan around that. I'm less convinced now that we're talking about a Premier League squad than I am if we were talking about building a Championship squad, but we'll wait and see.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it, when you see the names that we've been linked with. I mentioned Doyle before. He was previously at Manchester City. Charlie Gray, who's at Man City, never kicked a ball for their first team, 19-year-old, but seriously highly rated. And Man City have made a bit of a habit of this, of selling on players from the academy for big fees who've never kicked a ball in their first team. I mean, the most obvious example that springs to mind is Cole Palmer went to Chelsea.
Yeah.
There have been plenty of others, and that's almost it is a level up from what we've been looking at previously, isn't it? Despite the fact these are improving kids, there are players in these academies who they are just waiting for a chance, and when they do get the chance, they're going to be worth a lot of money. Are you happy with that approach though? Because as we've touched on a few times already, we're going to need a smattering of top level experience to stand any chance of staying up.
As long as we're not just signing kids, I'm quite happy. If we bring in, a couple of experienced heads as well, I think that can only be a good thing. You look at that. I mean, I've not heard of much of this lad from City who we have been linked with, but Man City, he's not going to be a kickabout, is he? He's going to be a good player, isn't he? To go through their academy. So, and he's probably one of those ones where we kind of look to bring in, because that's what we're known for now, isn't it? For someone who hasn't quite made it there, they want to get rid of him probably for PSR reasons or whatever it is. Comes to Sunderland, sorts his career out. We're really good at bringing up young players, is what we've seen with the likes of Chris Rigg and Jobe, for instance. So I think it would make sense that, like I said, going off from, I haven't got a clue who he is. So, but I like Doyle. I must admit that I think he'd be a good player. I think he's a good footballer, and obviously he's got Premier League experience as well. And I think the deal was £2 million or something, wasn't it? So it'd be quite cheap. So I think he's a good player. But ultimately, anyone who comes here, as long as they've the recent signings like your Jobs and your Wilson Isidores and that, who come in and immediately get what the club's about and play for the badge and everything like that. And as long as they end up like that, I'll be quite happy. But we've just got to be careful, I think, of not bringing in, say, if we need, 6-7 players, making sure that, yes, sign some young lads and bring them up, but we also need that, that experience, like we mentioned, Jordan Henderson's or whatever. A striker, is what Phil said, a striker who's had experience at top level would be beneficial for us. Just to come in like a poacher or something, someone who's going to get a goal out of nowhere, which we have in my end, and Isidore, to be fair, but we also need that one who's going to score, your 6-yard ones, your half chances and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks, I think, to see how things play out. I think by the time we next chat, Phil, we might have a few players through the door. We'll see how things go. Just before we kind of round up. Well,
after I've said that, Jane Dan's will be announcing in an hour's time. You'll have to can this podcast.
Just quickly, on Jaden Dan's, Gav, is he the only player to have been in a promotion-winning team never to kick a ball?
I don't even think he's ever trained with us, has he? It is bizarre, but it's just one of them, and it's kind of rated off as something that happens at Sunderland occasionally. Something really bizarre happens.
I want to put it out there for any statistician and all that, because people who are more clever than me, is there been a player who's been promoted never to kick a ball for a club? I would like to know. DM me on Twitter.
How do things change for you then, Phil, going forward? Does anything change with the role now? Like as a reporter following Sunderland, now we're in the Premier League. We asked who did we ask about this the other week? I think it was Barnesy. We're just talking about it, because when you become a Premier League club, obviously it's less open to everybody, isn't it? It's like kind of a very, very different covering a Premier League club than it is to one the EFL.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I always only covered a Premier League team for 6 months, and then they got relegated, and then 8 years later. So I'm not quite sure yet. I'll be finding out along with you guys. My role won't change at all, really. I think the only difference is there'll be a lot more people covering Sunderland, and there'll be a lot more general attention. But so I guess in that sense,
you'll not just be like a couple of years turn up for press conferences.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah. So that kind of thing is going to be completely different, really. But I don't really mind that, because even having said that, I'm still going to be one of the only reporters who's there at every game, every press conference, kind of embedded in the city, if you like. So I still think there'll be a role for what I do and what we do. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, for sure, like the level of intensity. I mean, even just like the whole thing around the Bellingham thing has been like a little bit of an eye opener in terms of the level of attention. And so, yeah, it's good for fans. You'll get a lot more Sunderland coverage. I think that's the thing. It's you become part of the national conversation again in a way that obviously hasn't really happened in the last 8 years. So, but yeah, my Premier League experience is pretty limited, Gav. So ask me again this time next year, and I'll tell you. I'm very much a League One / Championship reporter. So let's see how I handle the step up.
A lot's changed since
side of it. Well. On the flip side of it, Phil, it must be exciting as well, because obviously you said there, 9 years, and we've had some hard times in that 9 years. To be looking forward to a season now where we're back where we belong, and obviously you're getting a report on that. It must be exciting as well as Dortmund, I suppose.
It is. It's super exciting. The last few years. I mean, I'd say pretty much since Alex Neil came in. Really, I've really enjoyed it. It's been really rewarding, fulfilling. The fact that people are excited about reading stuff and finding out about stuff rather than that kind of fear of what the hell's going on kind of thing is obviously there's been some significant bumps in the road along the way, but generally that feeling of like have been on an upward trajectory is super exciting. And I think I do genuinely have some confidence. We don't know how next year is going to go. It could be difficult. I do feel there is a genuine strategy in place to have Sunderland established at this level in 5 years, 10 years time. I do think that all things being well, fans can be really, really excited about the future. This isn't like a 1 year project. This is a multi-year thing. And I think even if the worst happened next season, I think Sunderland are going to leave themselves in a really, really strong position. So I think it's really exciting times ahead, and it's well deserved for the fans who've gone through all the rubbish of the last 8 years at times. And yeah, I'm really pleased that we have a club and a city, not just a club, we have a city to be excited about. Like Sunderland is absolutely on the rise. It's really, really exciting times, and I'm absolutely loving my own little corner of that. It's great.
I said it's going to be a busy few weeks. You've got a live show coming up, haven't you, at the Bridge Vaults in Sunderland? Do you want to tell people about what's going on there and what they can expect when they come along?
Yeah, so we're going to be doing if people may or may not have seen my little YouTube Q&As there. So we're going to be bringing that to a live format at the Bridge Hotel Vaults on Thursday, the 26th of June. It'll be my good friend Nick Barnes, friend of your show, will be joining me, and we'll just be doing a Q&A. We'll be chatting about Wembley, because as we said at the start, we haven't had enough time to sort of bask in that, and then we'll look ahead to the new season. As of this morning, there were literally a couple of tickets left. So if anyone is listening, there is literally a small handful of tickets left. So you'll have to be super quick, but I'm really looking forward to hopefully seeing some friendly faces there.
Yes, I'll be there. I've got my ticket, so I'm looking forward to it. £10 entry gets you a pie, supper, and a pint. So, and I like the Bridge Hotel Vault. It's a great venue.
It's a fantastic pub. If people haven't been, even aside from the live show, it's what a brilliant job they've done with the renovation. People need to go and check it out. It's absolutely fantastic, isn't it? Yeah,
and we'll be talking about. Leads me nicely into what we'll be doing tomorrow on the show, because we will be joined by Councillor Kevin Johnston, who has had a big part to play in all that sort of thing. We're going to talk about the city regeneration and how that intertwines with the football club, and how Sunderland just seems to be on the rise at the minute. And obviously pubs like the Bridge Hotel Vaults have benefited immensely from the increased investment in the city centre and the attention and everything. So looking forward to talking about that one tomorrow. We've got loads for people to catch up on. We had an interview with Michael Turner on Sunday, which if you haven't listened to that was a cracking interview. There was the On This Week pod with Chris Martin, Andrew and Kelvin on Monday, as always, going back into the history books and seeing what went on in that week in Sunderland's history. Again, some fascinating stuff around Dave Watson, the way we were promoted in 1990 via the courts, and some other bits and pieces. Loads to catch up on the Howie the podcast feeds. Make sure you do. Just leaves me to say thank you very much, and cheers for coming on, mate.
You're more than welcome. Always a pleasure, mate.
Yeah, and thank you very much, Phil. Good luck with the live show. See you there for a pint, mate, and a chinwag. Should be good.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Thanks very much for having me on. Always a pleasure.
Don't be too nervous. It'll be good.
It'll be fine. That's what I'm telling myself.
Absolutely. And thanks to listeners. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back with another show tomorrow. As I said, should have Councillor Kevin Johnston on with us tomorrow, which will be good. Something different. We'll talk about football, but also the regeneration of the city. So make sure you tune in for that. And we'll see you then.
podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.